What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. My name is Braden Carlson.
My name is Taylor.
My name is Shane, or as you might know me, Postart.
And I'm Matthew.
And we've got another guest for you guys today. We're just hitting them back and forth with the guests everywhere. We love a good guest episode because we have to talk a lot less. So we have a Triply board of Triply board of directors nominee here to talk about, well, your platform, I guess, for your campaign. But we want to get in a little bit about how you got into rockets and everything. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Anti-Gravity Group podcast, Alex Kuehn.
Thanks for having me.
All right, got the pronunciation right then. There was no correction there. I feel like that's worth touching on since, based on the spelling, I feel like I won't be the only one that struggles. So
no, it's people get it wrong all the time.
But like I said, you're running for the Triply Board of Directors spot. And first of all, when the ballots close?
I think it's April. I think it's around LDRS, yeah.
I think it's two weeks before LDRS, maybe. This is great information that I probably should have had on deck.
But since I'm running, but
right. Well,
I kind of assume that everybody who's going to vote already has, but I don't know. Maybe we can talk some other people into participating.
I don't know. There was
April 11th is the
April 11th.
There you go.
All right. Shout out Taylor. I believe in New York a couple years ago, there was some figure they had that like a massive amount of people had voted right at the end. So it's not a lost cause here. And I think you are the first person we've had running for board of directors that's going to be actively campaigning on the podcast, maybe since Bryce Chanis did. But anyway,
funny. I actually know Bryce. Him and I went to the same school.
Oh, okay. You and Embry-Riddle?
Yeah, Embry-Riddle out in Prescott, Arizona.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good fact check for the Arizona people. Your pronunciation of the city proves that you lived there.
Yeah.
Same thing with Boise, Idaho. If someone says Boise, not from there. We can identify it real quick.
There's a lot of fun stuff in the Wisconsin and Minnesota area up here too that have very unique pronunciations. It's always fun to watch people attempt to do that aren't from here.
Some of my favorites too on the opposite end of the spectrum are ones that seem obvious but aren't, like Salina, Kansas. You want it to be Salina really bad, and they call the river the Arkansas River, but the state is Arkansas. It's a mess over there.
Yeah.
Nevada, Missouri.
Oh yeah. Well, we could ramble about this for a while, but Alex, I think we'd rather hear your story. How'd you get into rocketry? And what's led you to want to run for the BoD and get as detailed as you want?
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably how I got into rocketry is almost a common tale. I actually saw October Sky in the theaters, and I don't know what year that was, 1999, which means I'm older than you think I am. I was also very small though when I saw that movie, so. Yeah, I basically saw that movie and wanted to do rockets after that. And my dad had done it previously in high school or something, so he was happy to accommodate me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like you said, pretty common tale. I actually didn't see October Sky until I was a teenager, but I did start flying rockets with my dad when I was like 5 or 6. Yeah, isn't that crazy, dude? I mean, I was born in 95. I'm prime contender to have seen it when I was little. I just never did.
I'm pretty sure I watched it like 35 times.
Yeah, I did take like a big break I did the ASTA stuff when I was like really small. But then what actually got me into high power rocketry was later on when I was when I left Embry-Riddle out in Prescott. I really wanted to do rocket powered like RC gliders. And I just couldn't wrap my head around paying the prices for commercial motors that were available. So I convinced myself that I'd save a bunch of money and learn how to design and build my own, which naturally I've spent, I don't even know how much I've spent, but it's probably tens of thousands of dollars at this point figuring out how to make my own motors. So
right.
It's not a cost-saving proposition at the beginning, but we could talk about that in more detail down the line here as we talk about my political platform.
Yeah, no, and that is, I mean, everyone likes to do the per pound analysis of making APCP, and even at this point, it's still a lot cheaper than buying commercial motors, but the upfront investment is something that's real easy to overlook until you start realizing what you need. But okay, so what is your history so far with Tripoli? I know you've written a couple programs, but I'm gonna just let you go off. Tell us all about your rocketry experience.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Tripoli black sheep. I started out doing research rocketry, and I was not a Tripoli member. I got told a lot that I was going to end this hobby for everybody and completely ruin it, which is also sadly kind of a common tale. And miraculously, the hobby survived me. So here I am 12-ish years later, now running for the board. But yeah, like I said, that I wanted to do RC rocket like gliders, and I was not willing to spend commercial motor money to do that, even though I ended up spending more than that figuring it out. But I went down the whole sugar motor rabbit hole, and it was probably the like absolute least efficient way that I could kind of get to what I wanted to do. But for me anyway, it ended up working out really well because I didn't have like a mentor to explain to me the right way to do these things. And I ended up having to actually learn like the science behind all of it. So as you alluded to, I've written like a couple of programs. One of them is specifically a motor simulation program that's like Burn Sim, but it's Excel based. So I wouldn't have gotten that skill set, I don't think, if I had a mentor who had told me, you want about this KN and like, use this formula, not this one. Instead, I tried to understand the fundamental science of it all, which has been really beneficial for me long term, but was very expensive. I Katoed a lot of motors, and I haven't had one Kato in probably, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years now. So I think I know what I'm doing, but I also like never say never.
Right.
I have some aspirations to do some bigger stuff, and I don't know, I could see something going wrong at that point. These things don't always scale the way you think they will.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say, almost word for word. But if it makes you feel better, you are in good company on this podcast in a couple of ways. I am the spearhead of ruining the hobby as well in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
Whether it be from the fail compilations or showing it too much, I've been told that I'm putting it in danger.
Yeah,
there's no shortage. Oh, go ahead.
There were like Reddit threads about me. I did like a Kickstarter program a long time ago, and if you really dig, you might find it. But I was trying to make like sugar motor hardware, specifically where I had sort of like characterized this one design and was going to show everyone how to make this one design, so they didn't have to learn how to do it themselves. And yeah, there was like whole threads dedicated to how this was a terrible idea and it was going to ruin the hobby and people are going to blow their arms off.
Yeah, well, and I mean, again, like I've said, I've been using the same Rocketry forum account since I think I was 13. So same thing. If you go digging through my past posts, there's some stuff that I'm like, well, yeah, I can see how people were not thrilled by this concept. But I did see that was interesting in your bio on the board of directors page that, you know, a lot of your drive for what you'd like to see changed, it comes from the fact that you weren't exactly welcomed into
I was not
the hobby.
There was a lot of very angry people, and I did ultimately end up joining Tripoli, obviously, because I got into this doing the RC rocket glider thing. Like, I didn't really have to go to Tripoli launches to do that, and I don't know, it probably took me about 2 years to actually get to flying an RC rocket glider. And in the interim, I ended up building a lot of like sort of like saucer type things. Those are a really fun way to test your own motors that are really low stakes. You don't have to get a parachute, charge to work or anything like that, which is still something that plagues me. The last rocket that I had that didn't make it, my homemade parachute charge didn't work for some reason. But I did end up joining Tripoli. I don't remember what year that was. It was a long time ago now. It was when I've lived in Minnesota twice. I'm from Wisconsin originally. I did my level 1 at the Minnesota Tripoli Club up here, just north of the Twin Cities, and then I through all of my rocket sciencing to understand how to do this stuff, I actually ended up getting a job at Aerotech out in Utah briefly, and I was the production manager there for all of 3 months. And I actually ended up leaving, and it, there was nothing like wrong with the Aerotech job. It was really fun, and I wanted to keep doing it. And Utah's beautiful, so like I kind of lament that I didn't get to live there longer. But I got this really amazing opportunity to go work on actual space hardware in Texas, so I did that. And then when I was working at Aerotech, I with the Tripoli Nevada group out at I want to say it was Gene Dry Lake Bed. I did my level 2, and that's as far as I've taken my certifications. I might do my level 3 here at some point, but I have a philosophical qualm with paying so much for a large certified motor when I can build one much cheaper than that. But this gets back to my gripes about the certification process.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not alone in that thinking, right? There's plenty of people who I know several people who started making rocket motors before they started flying rockets, and most of them still aren't Tripoli members, but it's because most of them can go to FAR and things along those lines. But so yeah, we're definitely interested, and we can go ahead and jump into it if you want. What's your platform for your BoD election here?
Sure. So I should say the obligatory Tripoli BoD candidate thing. I want to uphold our current safety standards and make sure that nothing we do, harms the hobby. But that said, there's a few things that I'd really like to see happen. One is like I want to see the barriers to entry for this hobby come down. I think it's immensely frustrating how kind of gatekeepy this hobby can be. And I don't necessarily fault the people that are doing that, because a lot of them have been in this a lot longer than others, and they went through the whole ATF lawsuit and all that stuff, and they went and they fought this big battle, and they did almost lose the hobby. So I don't want to belittle their experience, but I also think that if we're not careful, we can also inadvertently kill the hobby by being so not fun about how we do this. So I want to make it more welcoming, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we change the current certification process. I would like to see there be sort of an alternative certification process. So maybe if you came to this hobby from another background and you have the skill set to build your own motors, maybe you team up with I don't know what you'd call it, but a TAP or something like that, and they sign off on your technical ability, and then you don't have to go buy a bunch of certified motors when you're already proficient at building motors, for example. That's something that I think would be interesting. And then kind of another thing that I think is a really big issue for this hobby right now is the cost of motors. And I think there's a lot of ways to address that. I don't think any of them involve AP, really, which is maybe a hot take. It's gotten I don't know how much you guys know about the defense side of solid rocket motors and what is going on with all of the conflicts that we have all over the place right now. But there's a shortage of AP, and price is going up because there's a lot of demand for it. And the supply is also heavily consolidated in the US. So I don't know if this is still true, but I think it was last year that Aerotech started having to use non-US AP for any hobby stuff, because there's I forget what it's called, but there's basically a law in the US where if something is a critical defense asset, the military gets first dibs on it. So that's an issue, and I don't think there's currently I don't know if I'd call it a legal. I guess it's kind of both. It's kind of a logistic and a legal issue right now, keeping you from doing anything that isn't AP. because that lawsuit was specific to AP, and that is what, got deregulated. So if we wanted to, and Estes motors are kind of grandfathered in, and there's a size limit on how big you can make like a black powder motor. So even though it's okay to use potassium nitrate, the key oxidizer in black powder for small sizes like that, you can't currently make like a certified motor with the way the rules are written that is based on another oxidizer. And like, it doesn't have to be potassium nitrate either. There's other options out there. I personally think that that's probably the lowest cost one because it's also one of the safer ones. But I think it would make sense if the EEE, membership, kind of agrees with me that this is a big issue, that we take some of the resources that EEE have and we go and engage with ATF again, and we start to lay the groundwork for additional propellants that, can be used by hobbyists and in a commercial sense. Because like Aerotech doesn't have any, or CTI doesn't have any incentive to go develop a non-AP propellant when the bulk of their business is commercial and defense stuff. And that's not like their fault either. Like they gotta pay the bills. So I think that might be a place where EEE should take the lead on that. And there's certainly some R&D to do before that, because it's not currently allowed. I don't think there's been very much work done on a composite propellant that would sort of be an alternative to what we have right now. There are, there's tons of like sugar motor stuff out there, but the sugar motor stuff, you need to get to a composite propellant because sugar propellants are too brittle to be shipped all over the country and deal with like the heating and cooling. And yeah, anyway, so I think it would be cool if we could all agree that that's worth doing. I think we could go get a new class of propellants approved by the government, and then we could have, then Aerotech or CTI or somebody new could also come in and actually make certified motors with a propellant that is significantly cheaper than AP.
Braden, you're muted.
I think we lost you.
You're muted, Braden.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, well, it's an interesting thing, not to call it the same situation, but there's a lot of parallels here in this sort of what a lot of people in EEE and just in rocketry hobby in general would probably consider sort of radical solutions and thinking.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of parallels between it and the way Taylor and I came up in the hobby, because we started flying high power when we were about 13. Taylor was what, 11?
Yeah.
So there was, a small handful of us teenagers that knew what we were doing, and we were operating with our parents and doing it safely. But at the time, there was no path for, the EEE mentor program. NAR had the junior level 1 set up. That was sort of the first step towards further allowances. And now there's this big, open, not open, but there's a way in for people under the age of 18 to fly rockets.
Yeah.
So obviously some drastic changes are not out of the question, but
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I do think EEE is getting a lot better. And kudos to the leadership of the last sort of iteration of the board and the EEE leadership, because like the stuff that we're seeing with like liquid motors and, Rick Moshik, who's also running for the board of directors. So if you'd rather have him than me, vote for him. But he put a lot of work into getting steel nozzles approved for sugar motors, which I think is something that it should have never really been a question. This gets back to one of my other kind of qualms with EEE, is that we have a lot of sort of, a lot of kind of like hearsay safety rules that aren't necessarily scientifically based. And it's, it's based on people's experience, and like there is a place for that. But I also think it's not inappropriate to question some of these things and collect a data set and then change the rules if we find that they don't actually make sense, which is what they did for sugar motors. And I think that's fantastic that they did that. So I think the time is right, and the right people are in place to be receptive to some of these bigger structural changes.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because Shane and I, being so close to FAR, sort of get to live with one foot on either side of the fence and seeing all this stuff where people, I mean, we had a friend who was developing an extreme low cost potassium nitrate based composite propellant. There's ammonium nitrate. I'm never going to advocate for zinc sulfur, but they are still flying it out here.
I don't know if that's the answer.
No, I could almost wholeheartedly say it isn't, but
yeah,
I think for me personally, as cool as the ideas seem that you're putting forward, the one thing that I would push back on, assumably a lot of people, is that, you know, just the idea is good, but do you have any more? We'll go back to the certification thing for a second. Do you have any more concrete, like in-depth sort of what specific requirements would have to be there, what you have to be able to do to prove to whom that you're able to just kind of step in like this? Because there's, you know, in the world of motorsport, there's petitioning in. If you have experience racing in one discipline already, or you've proven that you've done it out of the country, a lot of times there are ways for an organization to let you in. So I'm personally not against the concept, but I would love to hear more details if you got them.
Yeah, I don't know that I have all of the details. I mostly want to facilitate the conversations so that we can talk about what people would be comfortable with doing. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways you could do it that's still safe. And arguably might be safer than some of the current stuff, because like at the end of the day, you still have these people throwing together rockets with no supervision. Then they show up and you're expecting the launch coordinator to take a look at these and make a judgment call right there on the site. So, you know, maybe it looks more like a level 3 kind of thing where you have to work with somebody to get approval, or, you know, maybe you have to do for lack of a better term, like a qualification campaign on your motors where you test fire it 10 times or something like that, and then you do some statistics and you figure out what the standard deviation is, and you do a 3 sigma bell curve, and you're like, well, it's probably going to fall in here. So then now you've kind of done like your own mini certification of your homemade motor without, you know, the AAA motor test group or something like that. So like I think there's a lot of ways you could do it. What will make people the most comfortable, I think, is probably a discussion we all need to have, but it certainly doesn't seem insurmountable. And I think there's a lot of scientifically sound ways that could be, if not be as safe as what we have right now, if not more safe. Because like, you know, getting your level 2 you don't have to know anything about making motors to get your level 2. And once you have your level 2, you can show up with a research motor and fly it. So like,
right.
I think, you know, having a process with more vetting that kind of sidesteps the traditional certification process, depending on what you're trying to do, could potentially actually be safer.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think I disagree with that at the surface level. And to your point, you know, nobody's really just handing out information on how to make rocket motors. So there's unlimited.
If you want to learn, you can sometimes come up against a lot of pushback on it, right? Even if you're certified.
And then, you know, when you
stuff that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, or if you're asking for help, and because you can find anything you want on the internet, is a world of confirmation bias. So you could be reading a great instruction on how to do everything wrong, and when you bring that to the table for somebody who's experienced, for them to only push back and say, hey, stop, you don't know what you're doing, you don't even need to be trying this, is like, again, like I said, drawing a lot of parallels to me and Taylor growing up wanting to fly high power and asking for help and then becoming scared to do so because the answer was always going to be don't do it at all. So it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, there used to be Thunderflame was a in-person APCP course that taught people how to make rocket motors. Even something like that would be such a cool asset, even foregoing the concept of bypassing the current certification setup.
Yeah.
Having things in place to help people understand not just how to make a rocket motor, but how certain components of it work. Shane and I are actually sort of in the middle of this right now. We just mixed our first propellant ever, and both of us are super nerdy, so we want to understand why everything is working the way that it is, but not everybody's gonna be like that right off the bat. They're just gonna want to throw stuff in a mixer.
I think there's kind of a knowledge gap too. Like there's a lot of people to build their own motors, but they don't understand like the chemistry or the like engineering behind the cases, and like they don't necessarily understand pressure vessel design and like heat transfer and these things that all play a factor in designing a motor. So like some of it is, for lack of a better term, kind of cookbook stuff and experience, and like there's certainly a place for that. I don't want to exclude anybody. Like I don't think you need to have an engineering degree to make your own motors, but depending on the level of research rocketry you're trying to do, comes a point where you need to have more knowledge than just the formula and what has worked for people in the past if you actually want to push the bounds at all and do anything new.
Right. And I mean, it goes even as far as Bryce Janis actually did a trade tech sample on this sort of thing where a bunch of different people made motors with the same formula, theoretically the same AP, and they wanted to see if everything was going to be the same. But there's always going to be those variables of chemical sources and chemical condition and age and a million other factors that are going to change how it behaves. So starting with something basic that you find on the internet may or may not come out the way that it's supposed to based on where you found it.
And even like where you are, like the humidity, the altitude that you're at, like there's it's rocket science for a reason. It's very, very complicated once you actually get into the minutia of it and all the interdependent relationships between all these things. So
I'm curious if anybody else from the AGG has anything to bring forward.
I'm just curious. Is there really are there a lot of people that are looking for an alternative path to the requirements to allow you to build rocket motors?
That's a good question, and I don't have that answer because I think generally the people that are on the outside. So,
because I'm not really against it, but to me the barrier seems pretty low already, because I could spend $180 in a weekend and I could have a level 2 certification. So
can you?
Yeah.
What's a level 1 motor go for these days? Like $50-$60, and then 100 something for a level 2 motor, and
a 38 millimeter single use H motor is about $49, and then
for 50.
And then about $90, 95-ish for a 38 millimeter J motor.
Okay, it's about 150 right there. And then we also two rocket kits, or I guess you can do it.
You could use the same rocket. So I mean, if you really wanted to use like a 3-inch mailing tube and do full scratch built, you could easily have a rocket for $30. If you did a kit, you're probably looking at 60 to plus, 60 to 100 for a level 1, level 2 capable rocket. But it just doesn't seem, for someone that's going to build your own rocket motors, that doesn't seem like that much of a difficult thing to do to get to that point, to just, I don't know. You're kind of weeding out the people that just say, I want to make motors, and I need to know how to do that. And I'm not saying there's not a better way to do that, but it's certainly, the process currently kind of allows people to jump through hoops that if you don't want to, there's a lot of people that see that you have to do that and they go, okay, that are kind of have ill intentions. The people that want to learn to make the motors for bad reasons, we'll say, and then they go, okay, well, I'm gonna go on to something else.
Sure.
So I don't really know as I said, I'm not opposed to any of the things that you're saying. I guess we open up discussion to figure out what that course would be, or
I think
path.
I think to Lex's point too. I mean, being able to develop other, propellant types will also help reduce the like dependency on AP. So when we do have these moments of like, having to, obviously you need to do it in a safe way, but when we have these moments of time where like AP is hard to find and it's really expensive, like being able to find other alternatives, I think is definitely a positive thing.
I do like the idea of alternatives, even if that is not the like main propellant people are using, because like I don't know, a lot of things that are happening right now are very parallel to what was happening 25 years ago, and that caused hybrids to come out, and a lot of people were flying hybrids. Of course, when we made it through the legal troubles and things, and everyone kind of forgot about hybrids, but there was a time where every launch you would see hybrids, and they were a very common thing.
You could play devil's advocate and say, well, maybe we should all go back to hybrids. Why do we need to go open this like ETF can of worms when we already have a alternative that doesn't necessarily require AP? But I don't know. Personally, I'm more scared by liquid oxidizers than I am, some of these alternative solid oxidizers. So there's certainly ways to do hybrid safely, but I think it requires a level of skill above what a solid does. Yeah.
That kind of ties into my question, if I may ask.
Yeah, go for it.
So, I haven't been in this hobby for a very long time, but it seems to me like in the past year or so or more, feels like liquid propellant motors are becoming more approachable. Like thinking about what.
I'm really glad to see that happening.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on like how this can be expanded, or if there's any like concern for its growth, or
liquid motors specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when we talk about like the barrier to entry, the cost to build a liquid propellant motor it's up there. So like, I think it could be expanded, but I don't think it's a good solution for the 90th percentile of the hobby. And I also think when we have these discussions too, I think it's probably important to kind of keep in perspective how small this hobby is. Like, I don't know what the current numbers are off the top of my head. We have like a few thousand members in Tripoli, but like a couple hundred of them are like active basically. It's probably, we have all of these like students that are members, and then they don't remain active after they graduate from college or whatever, and they don't need it. So we have like really inflated looking membership numbers, but the actual people that are doing high power rocketry regularly is relatively a pretty small number. And like the percentage of people doing research rocketry is even smaller than that, which is why it'd be hard to make like a business making like say a kit liquid motor or something like that, or stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's worth keeping that in mind too, because like when we think about the risk of these things, it's not some insurmountable, or like we have to deal with 10,000 people doing this. It's like it's a pretty small percentage of the people who want to do this hobby. And that's also why I think the getting a new certified propellant option out there would make a lot of sense, because there's a lot of people that like they shouldn't be making their own motors, or they don't want to, but there's no alternative for them right now. So I don't know. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
No, that answers my question.
I don't know.
No, thank you. That does.
The alternative propellant, the biggest barrier in my mind is beyond the hobby. Like you're saying, it would require some ATF action, but like the process of a manufacturer getting APCP propellant approved to be sold commercially is already quite involved with super expensive lab testing. So I guess my fear is that even given the option to expand into something else, it's just the barrier to entry is just going to be so, like the overhead's going to be insane, and it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's going to do this, but I've certainly over the last, year or so, maybe two, heard a lot of rumblings about people wanting to start new solid propellant motor companies. And like, I don't know if I believe it's going to happen because the barriers are so high. But I don't think any of us are super comfortable with the sort of monopoly situation we have right now. And like, I've got nothing against Aerotech. I worked there. It does make me a little uncomfortable though, that there's one company you can get certified motors from, and that could just like kill the hobby if Karman decides at some point that it's not worth it anymore. And I'm not saying that they're going to, but when you have a company that at the end of the day, like that company can get acquired by another company. And like maybe the current Karman leadership is like totally sees the value in this because it is a pipeline to new engineers, and it's an important part of the professional engineering pipeline to get students into aerospace engineering. So I fully believe that they want to support this and that they will, for the time being. But who's to say, 5 years from now, when their investors are unhappy with the returns they're getting if they don't flip it to somebody else and then they got the thing. So, I don't think it's immediately a problem, but it does make me nervous.
Yeah, well, and that's a fair thing too, because not to exclude Loki research, because Loki has some awesome propellant.
That's true.
But
hard to get that,
right, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is
there are other people that can do this,
right? But it's largely a volume like upkeep issue. Where production availability. Taylor and I talked about this a lot before. Not to, if Gary happens to be listening to this, not to throw anyone under the bus or anything, but he was well beyond the retirement age when Karman took over, and we were like, what big private equity is going to be interested in this, and what's this hobby going to look like in 10 years? And we pretty sure at that point that we were looking at this hobby pretty much only being people who make their own motors at some time in the not insanely distant future.
That is an option. As a big proponent of research rocketry, I don't think it's insurmountable that we could all switch to sugar motors. They're really not that difficult once you understand them. But I also don't think that's the answer for everybody. So it'd be good if we didn't all have to do that.
Right. And well, I guess what I'm driving at here is that while the federal approval to make something, sellable is pretty insurmountable by the standards of pretty much anybody just doing this as a hobby, to take that step to become a manufacturer is what I mean. It would be really awesome to see alternatives that people who are doing research motor stuff have access to. We see a sugar motor fly every once in a while, but I think the barrier to that specifically is proving the safety. And I think the way that they went about it with liquids was pretty well thought out in terms of you have to prove to us that this is going to work. You have to submit these designs and people have to understand how and why this works. And then you got to test fire it, and then you can fly it, and then we'll say it's okay. So, but the whole principle here that you're sort of working with, in my observations, is that, the people that are going to have the drive and willingness to do this aren't the people that we really need to worry about trying to speed run it. To Taylor's point, how many people are actually trying to skip getting their level 2 certification? I think the conversation is a good one to have, because what basically that level 2 test is it's a question of how much do you really care? Like how much you can fly your H123s, and that's, you're basically flying a G motor. We're putting I600s in people's hands. It's a little crazy, but as far as people who aren't going to take the time to even understand the knowledge to pass the level 2 test, that's sort of a unspoken, should these people be allowed to make research motors barrier.
And I don't personally think the test is the problem. The issue I have with it is the cost of all the gear you need to do it. Because you need $150 and like, to your point too, like you're like, well, who's going to get into making their own motors for less than $150? But you actually can do it for less than that, especially with 3D printing these days. But I think it's more about having to spend that money on top of maybe the money you've already invested into learning how to do motors. And like, that's why I'm gainfully employed. I make, a reasonable living as an aerospace engineer. but I don't want to go get my level 3 because it's so much freaking money for something I already know how to do. And like, I don't have an issue with, arguably, like, I should go through the level 3 like approval process. I've never done dual deployment. I've never needed to. My interest is in building motors. So like, I haven't done a bunch of the traditional rocketry things that you would expect somebody of my sort of background to have done. And I don't have any issue going through that and going through with a mentor. In fact, I want to do that because it's an expensive rocket at that point. You don't want the thing to crater. But specifically with level 3 as an example, like how much is an M motor? Like, I don't know, $400, $500. I haven't looked recently, but they're a lot of money.
Low 300s on the bottom end. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, if I could go build my own motor, for my level 3, that would be an awesome like workaround, I think, as an example. And like, maybe that's the level that this sort of alternative certification process should be at. Maybe it shouldn't be for level 1 or level 2. I kind of think that if you've gone to the trouble of learning how to make your own motors, you don't necessarily also need to go buy a few $100s of certified motors to show that you know how parachutes work and how to glue fins on. But yeah.
I think
$100 is still a lot of money to some people.
That is kind of a good point. The level 2 to level 3 jump is, and we've talked about this before, by the time I actually did my level 3, because I had planned to do it 10 years before I actually ended up doing it. It was interesting because my taps were people that I knew, and they'd known that I'd been flying, level 2 impulse motors since I was 16. But they're like, well, I have to watch you put this motor together. And I'm like, it's weird because this is a 4-grain 75. And if I had just bought this other reload for this case, that's an L. And you don't need to see it. You'll just trust that I'll do it right. But instead, since this one has 80 more Newton seconds.
Yeah.
So
I think I want to say I was talking to Rick Moshik about this. And he asked me what was the difference between an L and an M, and I'm like, I don't know. He's like 1 Newton second. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
A big igniter.
Yeah, and there's like the joke of like the full L, because like these, the certification allows for something like plus minus 10% on total impulse. So like you might be flying an M at the high end L.
Exactly.
I don't know.
So, and I mean, if somebody already has experience making 3-inch research motors, that you're basically already there. Because to the same point, one could argue that there's a never ending, but what about this? You could throw around whataboutisms for the fact that you could be level 2, get your level 3 with the commercial motor, and then you're just suddenly allowed to make a 6-inch P motor if you wanted to.
Right.
Is sort of this other similar but different argument. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of nuance here that could be brought up. So, it's
you might not save money doing this either, but it might be a more fulfilling journey to go figure out how to build your own M motor and then start on that too. So, like, I don't know, you could make a case from an educational standpoint that's better too for people, but I don't think it needs to necessarily be one or the other. That's why I said that I think it'd be nice to have an alternative pathway.
One thing I was thinking about was I feel like Estes is really starting to kind of grow in towards the like high power community, and I think what they have their Estes energetics, like maybe there's some potential path there that could be expanded on. But
I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Estes Energetics also got sold to a big VC firm. So
I was going to say, I think
Yeah.
given circumstances of recent events, I think they're going to be pretty occupied for the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah, they got bought. So like the hobby stuff is still it's a separate entity. Estes Energetics though got bought by Voyager, which is a Houston based. Maybe they claim they're DC based now, but they started in Houston. They started out as Nanoracks, which has a personal tie-in to me because my old company in Texas used to make the CubeSat dispensers for Nanoracks that are on the International Space Station. And then Nanoracks got bought by Voyager because Voyager was just like a shell company, and they didn't do anything. And then they they ended up buying Nanorex, and they bought a couple of other like space companies, and they've continued to acquire other ones and build this big like conglomerate. So that's what's happened to Estes Energetics. It's been swallowed up by Voyager.
Darn.
Yeah, so Matt, right now, our hope for bigger Estes Motors is our good friend and friend of the podcast, Adam Knippa over there. So he's
to make my case for alternative propellants, they're already making certified black powder motors. They could hypothetically make, if there was a composite potassium nitrate propellant, that would seem like a natural progression that maybe they could get into, if it was financially advantageous for them to do so, and they have a huge market. Maybe it makes sense for them. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's just
maybe wants to when they can't get AP.
Right. Yeah, that's the things. I'm just like in my head that, like I said, the biggest barrier is just the federal blockade. But
right.
I am with you on it being allowed for people with experience to make research motors to expand into different propellants. But I don't. As far as I know. Oh, go ahead.
And I think to go get that before we go re-engage the ATF, there's some work that needs to be done. Like right now, there's a big gap between there's a lot of people doing sugar motors, and then there's a lot of people doing AP motors, and we need to get we need the people with the skill set to come up with a composite potassium nitrate motor propellant or family of propellants, so that we can take that to the ATF. Because if we go to the ATF and we don't know what the hell we're trying to get approved, that's not going to work. We're not going to get a blanket approval for any other kind of oxidizer. But so I think we're probably going to have to get some people who understand how to do this, and maybe that's me, maybe that's some other people who do sugar motors. But the sugar motor crowd right now has no reason to do composite propellants, because sugar, you're not going to get a cheaper binder than sugar.
Right.
So for them, it doesn't make any sense to do, but they're not trying to ship these all over the place. So right now, the incentive structure doesn't enable anybody, doesn't really lend itself to somebody else developing this, unless it's just their personal pet project. And I've thought about doing it in the past, but at the time I wasn't living somewhere where I could test motors very easily. And now that I'm back in Minnesota, I'd like to revisit this. But I think, as if we decide that we want to do this, we get some people together who know how to do it, and we all, do these things, create a data set, and then we can go back to the ATF and say, this stuff is not any more dangerous than AP. What do you think about adding this?
Right.
I mean, so at the end of the day, what all that we've talked about so far really all boils down to lowering the cost as the barrier of entry for getting new people into the hobby, right?
Yeah.
Are there other things that you think can be done to allow people to more easily get into it?
I mean, there's certainly an educational aspect to this. I think we do a pretty good job of that right now with college students, but like I kind of said earlier, college students don't necessarily stick around and keep doing this. And I've known a couple of people who've went through that. And the thing that they always tell me is the reason they don't keep doing it is because of the cost. So I think that is founded, that is actually a thing that keeps people from doing this hobby. Certainly, I think there are other things that keep people from doing it. How many people even know this hobby exists?
Right.
Do we go out on a PR campaign and make people aware of this? And there's probably a lot of people in the community who don't want other people to know that this exists. To your point that you were talking about, you're sharing all this.
Oh, trust me, I'm familiar with some of them quite intimately.
There
are a lot. We need some new members that aren't college students.
Right.
If we want this to go on, I think. Anyway.
There are unfortunately a lot of small clubs that just want it to be their small club, and that's it, and it's unfortunate. But
yeah, and some of this really small stuff you can fly in parks and stuff too. That's another big thing. I think a while back I did when I was I had an ill-advised idea to try and make this like motor hardware that was specifically intended for sugar propellants, and I was gonna sell these, and I quickly realized that there was not enough people in this hobby to sell these to for me to like make a living off of that, and it was a dumb idea. But where was I going with this? I don't know where I was going with this.
It's fair.
Oh, yeah, I do know where I was going with this. When I was doing that, I did a poll to the Tripoli electorate to like ask them, what they thought the biggest issue was in this hobby. And the biggest one that came up was launch site access. So like, I think that is an area too, where as an organization, we should be doing everything we can to find new launch sites. Cause I mean, we can reduce the cost of motors and stuff like that too. But if you have to drive 3 hours and spend $100 on gas or whatever too, like that's another thing. And just the time aspect of it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was kind of shocked the first time I met Taylor because we grew up in Tripoli, Idaho. Shane and I are from Boise, and that launch site was 35 minutes from where we lived, roughly 40 minutes. Now we can drive under 2 hours, and there's a high power launch every single weekend where we live. So it's always a little bit crazy to me that Taylor, Cloudbusters is, for his intents purposes, his local club. So he's driving 4 hours each way every single time. Granted, we drive 25 hours to go to Argonia. It's pretty worth it in that particular case. But
if it weren't, I mean, there's closer options, but they're significantly worse.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth it to go there. But yeah, it's like we could definitely benefit from having launch sites that are closer to metropolitan areas, even if they're just alternatives that are closer, like you're limited by a waiver or something. But like there's a huge barrier of entry for people that just are super interested when I talk to them, until they hear that they don't really want to drive more than an hour.
Yeah. I mean, even I feel pretty fortunate with like the launch site availability that I have here in Minnesota, but I still have to drive. It's something like an hour and a half from where I am. So, and I'm in like a major metro area with a lot of rural land around us. So yeah, I think that is something that as an organization, we should be trying to facilitate having more options. And it's difficult to do, but maybe we need options that are closer to the city, but you can't fly everything there. A lot of this stuff you could fly in a park, but the way the NFPA, fire regulations are written too, you can't do it's, well, I shouldn't say you can't. I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
It seems to be kind of a gray area as to whether or not you can do like research motors, for example, in a park. And, certainly some people have.
Yeah, I was going to say, we kind of recently had a conversation about the limits of Class 1 on the podcast during one of our live episode recordings. And anybody who saw it live probably noticed that most of it was cut out by the time I published it. Because I was like, you know what? I don't even want any of this on me. Don't listen to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I am not a lawyer, and don't take legal advice from me. Just know that a lot of these laws are very, very gray and open to interpretation. And, none of us want to get in trouble with anybody who might regulate such things. So, I think that's one of the other really big barriers to entry. So I think it's like the cost of the hobby is prohibitive. To a lot of people, access to launch sites is a big problem. And also like, what was the other one? I don't know. I'm spacing out. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Those are like two big ones. Oh, and then awareness. That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
right.
like just knowing that it's a thing. Because like I can't tell you how many times I've told people that I do this as like a hobby, and they're like, "What? That's a hobby?"
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that I could do that. If I didn't already have 10 hobbies, I would totally do that. So like I think if more people knew about it and it didn't cost a small fortune to get into and to like also keep doing it, because like that's the other. I alluded earlier that we could talk about like potential cost savings with research motors, and like they might not necessarily. If you're doing AP too, it's a way harder to like make the case that it's going to save you money. But you can do M motors where the reloads cost you like something like $20 if you're doing sugar motors, and like it does take an investment to get to the point where you can reliably build an M motor that's sugar powered. But there's certainly a point where you could make the hobby inexpensive to the point where that just won't be a barrier with like 3D printing now. And if you're willing to make your own motors and like you have the skill set to do that, you can absolutely get to a point where this is as cheap as any other hobby, which I think would be a boon for the hobby as a whole, but is not very approachable right now because it's a scary topic to broach.
And if you don't believe how cheap a sugar motor is, you can go to FAR and Rick will do the math for you. And you don't even have to ask most of the time. He will tell you on the PA after one flies how much it costs.
It's not quite as cheap as Rick will say that it is, because he buys his potassium nitrate by the pallet, and I've never done that.
Fair.
Like, if you go to the hardware store and you're getting potassium nitrate there, you're paying more like $7 a pound or something for it. But even at $7 a pound, I don't know what AP is going for these days and like the binder and stuff, but it's got to be something like $30 to $50 a pound maybe at this point. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I don't think it's that much, but it is a lot. I think we're at like 12 to 15 a pound for 200 mic at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to your point,
that's pretty good. I didn't realize you could do it that cheap still. But
I'm fact checking myself now. But to your point, it's not just AP that you're buying.
Yeah, no, it's like AP, it's the binder, it's the metals if you're doing metals, and like
all in, it's probably $25 a pound, unless
that seems more.
Unless we're getting, if you can get some cheap AP,
which isn't necessarily a move either.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and like, there's a lot that goes into making your own motor, so it's not necessarily like a cost saving slam dunk. But sugar motors are a different order of magnitude than AP is in terms of cost savings. Like if you're buying AP 50 pounds at a time, like I bought potassium nitrate at 50 pounds at a shot. You can probably get it. I haven't looked at these numbers recently because I haven't been building motors, but the last time I bought 50 pounds, it was something like $2 a pound. And I know Rick, literally goes and buys it by the pallet because it's fertilizer and it's readily available. Like it's not like ammonium nitrate where it's actually classified as an explosive on its own. So it's a much more approachable and cost-effective oxidizer. And like if you do the math, like it's sort of impulse per dollar, which is what I think we should be optimizing for rather than just total performance. And this is another gripe I have about this hobby because like we put all of this, we get so hung up on the specific impulse of our motors, and then we are like mass fraction of the rocket. It's like 90% cardboard and fiberglass with like 10% motor, which is completely backwards from what you should do if you actually care about performance. But if we all built like rockets with a 90% mass fraction, like a real, launch vehicle, we'd also all be hitting like 20,000 feet on every flight, which is not practical. So like, I think it's important to remember that we're doing this for the spectacle and like the joy of seeing the rocket go foosh and the fire and the smoke, and not get too hung up on, well, AP's better specific impulse. Yeah, well, I don't know, build a little bit bigger sugar motor and you'll get the same place for a lot less money.
Yeah, that is true. And you're right. That's like a fascination that people have. And that is my immediate reaction. I'm like, I don't want to make a sugar motor because of the same size, I get a lot more impulse out of AP.
And let me tell you, so straight sugar motors, like you can get like about 135 seconds of specific impulse. There's been some really interesting research done by a couple of different people about actually doing sugar motors with metals in them. And you can get to AP levels of performance with potassium nitrate. I personally analyzed a data set from a friend of mine, Chuck McNeese, who lives in Michigan. And if you're ever bored, he has his own like rocket YouTube channel. And if you go Google like the Rocketeer Quicksilver propellant. Like if you watch that first video of him testing that, he had a really high KN and he had probably a little more aluminum in the motor than he should have, but he hit 175 seconds of specific impulse with a sugar motor, and it looked like AP. It had mock diamonds, I swear to God. So if you're hung up on the flame and you're hung up on the specific impulse, we can get there. Not all the way, because I mean you can get up over 200 seconds of specific impulse with the right AP formula, but most of them they're not that. So like we can really push sugar a lot further than we have if right. That is the goal.
And hybrids could be too. Like there's actual like space applications where hybrid motors are in use, and they're a lot more potent, or can be, than people think just based on the ones from the hobby. But I do have to correct myself here a little bit before we get out of here. The AP from Aerotech is $34 a pound if you round it up. It's $19 a pound for 200 mic AP from Pyrochem Source, and for potassium nitrate for Pyrochem Source, it's $3 a pound. So
there you go, 1/10 the price.
In case anyone listening thought Alex might be coming from smoke and mirrors, that's a little bit of clarity there for you. But
like the binders are a big problem too. Like HTPB, hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene, for anybody unaware of what that stands for and curious. That's like, what is it, like $50 a gallon? It's kind of
not cheap.
And there's some really interesting binders out there too, but people don't use them because they either don't know they exist, or all these propellant formulas are characterized with HTB, and like nobody wants to go take the trouble to characterize new propellants. So
right.
I think there's some like urethane rubber propellants that are really really promising, like Smooth On. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that or not, but it's like used in the movie prop industry, but it's like a 2-part rubber that you can get off of like Amazon. And that stuff, it's not cheap either, but it's a lot cheaper than HTPB. So like I think there's a lot of different things you can use as binders as well. So if we set our minds to solving this problem and we're okay, with doing things a little bit differently than we have historically done, I think, there's certainly ways to address all of these issues. And like, if you ask Gary about these things too, like a lot of these things that I'm proposing, like it's totally possible somebody did this like 30, 40 years ago and everybody's just forgotten because that guy isn't around anymore, or, it's not allowed anymore. So everybody stopped doing it. Like,
right. Well, does anybody from the AGG have any final questions here?
No, I don't think so. Had all mine answered.
I'm good.
All right, so let me put you on the spot one more time here. If you had one within a couple sentences, appeal to the masses that haven't voted yet, now's your chance.
I don't know. Just get out there and vote in general, even if you don't want to vote for me. It's a problem in U.S. elections, and it's a problem in Tripoli elections. Voter participation is important, and if you care about the hobby and which way it's going, that's one of the only ways you can actually impact it. So go vote for me or any of the other options if I'm not appealing to you.
Yep, I am a serial procrastinator with voting, but I specifically, because I was suspecting you might say something along those lines, I voted earlier this week. So
good on you.
I can say that I have done it now. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. My name is Braden Carlson. You can find me right here on YouTube at Rocket Vlogs. You can follow me on Instagram at Rocket Vlogs Official. We're almost to 100,000 over there, so get on over there. Follow me on Facebook at Rocket Vlogs Official as well. And check out aggmerch.com. Get yourself a Nigel the Rocket Cat something.
My name is Taylor. You can find me on YouTube at The Rocket Channel.
My name is Shane. You can find me on YouTube at Postart Propulsions and online at hprtools.com.
And I'm Matthew. You can find me here.
We are the Anti-Gravity Group, joined this week by Tripoli Board of Directors candidate Alex Kuehn. Don't forget to go vote. You can read all of Alex's bio information on the Tripoli website as well. This is the Anti-Gravity Group podcast, and we will see you all next time.
We might just hear from Nigel the Rocket Cat. Load up the professional masterpiece, you can bet on that. A launch and a chat with them is guaranteed to be a blast. It's the Anti-Gravity Group podcast. Ooh.